In this tutorial, I'm going to be looking at how to make a scrolling or scrollable text window in GDevelop. And I got the idea on the GDevelop forum where I saw this question. It said, how do I make an event text list that's scrollable? And the guy is looking to have event lists that scroll on screen, showing 3 or 4 events, but allowing the player to also scroll back to show older things that have happened. So line by line as events happen, and the text list scroll down or up as new lines. I mangled that. But anyway, it got me to thinking because in my current project, I actually have a shop menu that's created at the beginning of the scene, and it's completely dynamic. I don't have to drag shop items out before the game. I just have a list of a structured array, really, of my different shop items. And so when the game starts, it populates the items from that list. It resizes to give my camera boundaries so that the player can't scroll too far or too low. And how I am doing that or have done that is with the drag camera with pointer extension. And it's the first time I've actually made a scrolling menu like that. I've made many scrolling menus since I started, but I really like how it's dynamic. So I thought, if I could do that dynamic way just to generate, so I can be lazy and not have to drag icons out into the scene editor before the game starts, you could probably just convert that to doing something in game like this. So if we look at my scene properties for this game, we've got the game resolution. We set the width to 1280 and the height to 720. And I have no changes to game size. And I'm just going to mention that because it may be important. It may be that the calculations I'm doing would not work if you are changing the game resolution or the game size during runtime. So if you were doing that, you would definitely have to check that out to make sure nothing is going off in that. And I do have the drag camera with pointer extension installed. That's how I'm going to be scrolling. And if we go into my scene editor, we're going to see I have 3 layers. I have the base layer, the text boundary layer, and the text layer. So on my base layer, I have this blue and white background, which is just there to help you visualize more what's happening. And I have this button, and when I press this button, it's going to generate a new message for this text box right here. So in my button, I do have some variables. This is my event message variable. It is an array. It has 6 children in it, and each child has just a little message. And this is not important at all. This is because if you're doing an actual game where different actions trigger an event message, say you drink a health potion and it says player health has increased by 5, you wouldn't need this. This is just for this demonstration only. So in my next layer, which is the text boundary layer, this is above the base layer, I have this gray box, which I call my text display. And this is just the area I want displaying my text. And I did forget to mention, that's how this works without masking. Because I'm using an object that is actually very close to the screen size or the screen size, as in my project, when you open the shop menu, it basically blocks out almost the entire screen. So I don't need to use a mask to hide things because they're not going to see past that anyway. So that's what I have on this text boundary layer is the actual text window. This is where our text is going to show up. And you can see I have it slightly overlapping the main scene. So the default position is going to look like this. And when I click the gray object, the text display, it's going to open up to its full screen size. And you can also close it back up by clicking it once more. Okay, so That's how, that's why in this tutorial we're not going to get into masking because we're not going to need it. And that is also why I said if you are doing changes to size in your screen resolution, this might not work. Because what that will do, it could add extra room. So that you will be able to see some of the background, and then you will be able to see things scrolling up and down. So, also in our events, let's go back to our scene editor, our third layer, which is called our text layer, we have our text box. And it already has its first message in it, welcome player, and it's good to go. So we'll go into our events, and my first event is my beginning of scene event. And what I'm doing here, I'm taking a object variable, the text box object variable, default height, and I'm setting it to the size the text box is right now, right when the game opens, with one line in it. I'm getting that size, and I'm setting it, the variable default height to that size. Okay, and that is an object variable. You can, of course, also just do a global or a scene, whatever makes sense. So I will say, calculating it, the reason I'm doing this is we are going to calculate down here how much of a Y position to subtract based on the size of it as one text line here. So if your events are so long that it adds several lines of text to your text box, I'm not sure this would work. You might also have to devise a way to keep track of how many lines of text you just added and then saying subtract it by this height times the variable of how many lines of text I just added. I don't know. You would have to play around with that. I'm really going off of the idea that most games don't give a lot of text. I mean, if I had to read 4 paragraphs every time I drank a health potion, you know, I don't mind small messages, but I would find that a little bit overwhelming, and I would probably see if there was a way to turn off the default show events in game thing. So, all right, so that's our beginning of scene event. So now our mouse down events. Let me move this over real quick too. I just like to keep them to where I can hide them when I want them, because it looks really tidy. Okay, so on our mouse down events, this event is every time my mouse is pressed down, I'm going to trigger this once, so it's not constantly happening the whole time my mouse is down. I just want it the first time I press down, trigger that once, and change the scene variable, touch X and touch Y. I want to set that to the cursor X and the cursor Y position right now. And there might be a better way to do this. I'm fairly new to GDevelop, and I've never programmed it or even tried to do anything logical in my life. So this is how I'm approaching this problem of if I push my mouse down or hold my touch down and I keep it down and I move all around the screen and then I release it, I don't want to accidentally trigger a mouse released event while that's happening. For instance, if we come here, let's go back here. If I press my mouse down and I'm holding it and I'm going all the way around, oops, let me Control Z that, and I end up on this press button and then I release it, I don't want to trigger the mouse released event. I only want it to trigger if I click, not if I hold and scroll. So that is why this is right here. So none of these events under it are going to happen if you're scrolling around and then releasing the mouse. Only if you click and release the mouse. So the first thing I'm also going to check after that, I'm also going to check if the Boolean scene variable display text is false. And what that means, I'm only going to want to do these events if it's false. If it's true and my window is open and I can see the displayed text, I don't want to be able to add more text to my text box when I'm pushing this button. So again, that's nothing you would really need to worry about. Your events would be happening in game as whatever events you made make new messages happen. So now, so my cursor touch is on button. So mouse released, click, not drag, and this is not true. Then, and the touch is on the button. The very first thing I'm going to do is change my scene variable text number, and I'm going to set it random and range 0 to 5. And this is something you can ignore completely. This is a way for me to get a number to use for my variable, so I can display a different line of text. And like I said, you're not going to be doing that. Your own game, you're going to be doing different things that displays different text. You don't need this thing at all. So now, also on the button released, we are going to change the text, event text. We are going to add a new line. And how you get that is you just come event text, modify text, add, not set to. And then on your text, instead of typing in text, type in NEW, and you're going to see it come up right here, new line. And you can just select that. And the reason we're adding a new line is because we already have a message here, a welcome player message. So if we just add more text to that, it's going to place it right beside it instead of underneath it. So we want to tell it to put a new line in and then to add that new text on the new line. So that's why we have add a new text. Also on that mouse released over the button, we are going to change that text by adding a new line of text. And like I said, I have it set up, it's just going to randomly add a new line from the lines I've made. So another important thing here, we're going to change the Y position of this whole text box. Okay, we're going to subtract the variable we got up here in the very beginning, the height of the box with just that one line in it. We're going to subtract that from the Y position, because if we don't do that, every time we add a new message, it's going to, the new message will be here, and then here, and then here, and then it'll keep going down the screen. And what we want it to do is we want it to go up the screen. So the new message is here, 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 until it's flush with this bottom right there. And the reason I'm doing it that way, I actually had originally looked for a condition that would align the text box bounding box bottom to the gray text display bounding box bottom. We set that at 0. And I did not see a condition like that. Let's go to action. We'll hit event text and we'll hit bounding and nothing comes up. And actually it comes to my mind now, I might be able to hit text display and put bounding. Again, nothing. In the condition, it does come up if we search for bounding. Bounding box bottom position. So we'll be comparing the bounding box bottom position, and we'll want to see if it's equal to, but that doesn't give me any, let me delete that. That doesn't really help in this situation because I can compare the two bounding box bottoms and see, if they're not equal, but then I come over here, set the bounding box bottoms to equal, and nothing. There's nothing. So that's why I'm doing it this way, where I'm just taking the variable height and I'm actually moving the position of text up the screen by subtracting that height every time the text line is added. Okay, so that's the logic behind that. Now, maybe eventually there will be an action to just line the two bounding box bottoms up, and then you won't need anything like that. So our next mouse release is not concerning the button, it'll be concerning the text display. So these mouse release events for the text display, this gray box here, are going to check for two things. First, they're going to look and see, is the camera on the text boundary layer, is it equal to the center of this gray object? Or is it not equal to the center of this gray object? Okay? So, if the Y position of the camera on layer text boundary is equal to this gray object, we know we're already focused on it. That means our text display is open and we're looking at the text display window. So if that is the case, we want to set the Boolean value of scene variable display text to false because we're already displaying the text. So if we're clicking the boundary box, that means we want to close the text display. So if the Y position of camera 0 layer text boundary is not equal to the text display, that means when I click this gray box, if it is not already equal to this, then that means we want to see the text display because it's not there right now. So that means we will set the scene variable text display to true. True, we do want to see that text display. And so how we're going to use these scene bools is we're going to come down here and we're going to look if the Boolean variable of scene value if the Boolean value of scene variable display text is true. That means we want the window to open up. We're gonna trigger once this part because we don't want it to keep doing that. Change the Y position of our camera on text layer to this gray box center, and change the Y position on the text boundary layer and set it to the same center Y position right here in this gray box. Okay? That's our trigger once. And it doesn't really hurt if we keep doing that. It'll just keep putting it there. But it is good to just get in a practice of trigger once, or, making sure it doesn't repeat it over and over unnecessarily. But this part we don't want triggered once. That's why we don't just have this up here. That's why we have it here, where we actually want the things triggered once. This part we want to happen all the time because we don't want to try to scroll our text and not be able to because it was only triggered once. So, alright, so if the Boolean value of scene variable display text is true and the height of text display, that's our gray object. If this text display, our gray object, is actually shorter than our text object, then we want to be able to drag the camera on text layer, only on text layer, vertically. We don't want it to move in both directions, although we could. The way we've set up our camera boundaries, it actually wouldn't hurt if you put both. But since we only need to move it vertically, that's how I put. So the reason behind this, you couldn't just leave this out and have it, if it's true, if the display text Boolean is true, to let it drag the camera with these camera boundaries. But the reason I don't do that is when you run the scene and say we have this much text and you go to open the window, the text is actually displayed in the center, see? Because our camera boundaries are enforced kind of oddly in that situation. Not in the situation we're using them, but so it would put them in the center, and it just looks funny. So the way this is set up is that we only allow a scrolling to happen if we need it, not if we don't need it. Okay? If the player has this much text to look at, they don't need to scroll. Period. Okay? There's nothing to scroll to. So look, I'm scrolling, it's not moving. Why? Because even though the Boolean is true, the height of text display is not less than the height of the text box. Okay? So that's the logic behind that. It actually doesn't even let you scroll unless both of these conditions are true. The Boolean variable display text is true, and the height of this gray box is actually shorter than the height of the text box. Okay. So the last condition I have for this is we're checking if it's false. And this is just a trigger once. Everything here could be done once. Oh, actually, let me take that show button out. I was hiding it every time the display text was true, just because I didn't want it to be distracting. But I felt that that would be confusing because people might not realize that this is transparent text window that you can still see the game happening behind. So now if the display Boolean value of scene variable display text is false, then we're going to change the Y position of the camera on text layer, and we're going to change the Y position of the camera on the text boundary layer, and we're going to move them back to the screen height divided by 2. And that's just the default position right there. Okay? So right now they're resting at screen height divided by 2, which is just the center of the screen. And when you open the screen, they are moving to the center of this, they're centering the camera on this gray object. And when you close it, they're moving back to default. So let's see how this works really quick. It's pretty simple. You have your welcome message or open window, which you open or close by clicking anywhere in the gray area. You would obviously want to change that up, maybe a button or something, I don't know. So every time we press the button, a random message is going to be added. And I've already showed you that you can open this window and it will not let you scroll because you don't need to. And that's not how I set the logic up. Okay? So we'll add some more events. Player click the button. We'll go look. Still don't need to scroll. So it's still not letting me scroll. We will add some more events. A new message has been logged. That's our last event. A new message has been logged. And now look, it is going to be higher than this gray box. Our text box is now way bigger than this gray box. We can't even see how far up it goes. So now we can scroll. It's going to let us scroll all the way back up to this welcome player message and all the way back down to the new message has been logged. Okay, so let's add some more messages. And I will just show you that, say your player scrolls all the way up and reads the welcome player and then closes the window, it automatically sets it back at the default of where it had been. So the player doesn't have to worry about scrolling up, closing the window, and that message welcome player stays here. And now they can't read the new messages as they're listed because they're listed somewhere off their screen. Okay? So that's it. That's just one really simple way, I think, to set up a scrollable menu, and that works well as it is with something that's going to be the size of the game window. You can probably fix it with masking to even work if it's smaller. I haven't done that because, like I said, I based this on my project that I'm working on right now, a shop that I have in there, where when you open the shop menu, it's in portrait mode and it takes up the whole screen. So I didn't need to worry about masking or anything like that. But anyway, hopefully this is helpful. Hopefully it gives people some ideas and showcases what a great extension that drag camera with the pointer is. I actually use this extension in all my games and not just for menus. I use it, so the player can move around the screen. This and the, well, there's several extensions I really like. So hope you enjoyed it and hope this gives you some ideas.